Hi everyone, West here from Liberty Park Music with a very special piano lesson of an arrangement of one of the most popular film themes out there, the Force theme from Star Wars. Now, this theme doesn't technically have an official title like Yoda's theme or the Star Wars main theme, but instead shows up periodically throughout the music of the films as an instantly recognizable musical cue that, much like the Force itself, kind of binds the narrative together, both musically and otherwise. Now, this theme is a huge fan favorite, and I got so many requests for it that I decided to make an arrangement so that it could stand by itself as its own little piano piece. So, let's give it a listen. So you may have already guessed what our main focal points are going to be when you were watching and listening to the playthrough of this. But just to confirm, there are two key things that are going to necessitate some extra attention when learning this arrangement. One, an understanding and familiarity with the left-hand accompaniment. And two, an understanding of the various rhythms we see in the right-hand melody and how they fit together with that accompaniment. And we'll touch on a couple of other things as we go along, such as the harmonic content and the trajectory of the dynamics, but these are really going to be our two areas of focus. Now, while normally I would recommend starting with the melody and getting it under control, the constant presence of this arpeggiated left-hand accompaniment and the fact that it's serving as the groundwork against which those rhythms in the right hand are being played means that we're probably best served working it out first. So let's look at our first four bars. Now, these big arcing arpeggios are sometimes referred to as rainbow arpeggios, obviously for their tall curved shape, and you see them a lot in romantic music, particularly in the music of Chopin. They're everywhere in the nocturnes and the ballades, and they become a very standard kind of left-hand accompaniment. Now, the trick here is to recognize that there are only a few different variations of them in this piece, and by variations I'm talking about the way the notes are patterned, how they go together, and how your hands are going to have to move to achieve them. Looking at the first measure, you can see our fingering, 5-2-1, 3-2-3-1-2, is chosen to best facilitate having to cross our hand up to get the B and D, and then to cross our thumbs back under. And we can see this exact same figure in measure 3, and it shows up several more times while we're still in the key of G minor. Now, this figure also shows up in our E minor section. But before we look at that, let's quickly look at the next figure, which we get partially in measure 2 with this 5-2-1-3-2, and then completely in measure 4 with the tail end filled out 3-2-1. Now, remember, what we're looking for specifically here is shape, which usually corresponds with fingering. And when you combine the two of these things and can think of them as a unit, that's when you really start to make things easier for yourself. So let's look now at bars 17 and 20, 17 through 20. And if you look at bars 19 and 20, even though the fingerings aren't there, you can see the same shapes happening. And yes, you guessed it, we're going to use the same fingering here as we did in those previous versions of this figure back in our G minor section. So let's continue this by looking at a different figure that shows up in measure 7. This time we have a little dip in the center of our rainbow so that we can facilitate some harmonic motion, resulting in some slightly different fingering, but another clearly identifiable shape that we see numerous times throughout the arrangement. Let's jump over to measures 21 and 24, and you can see that 21, 23, and 24 all have figures that, while different or slightly different in their notes, have the same shapes and, importantly, use the same fingering, which is really essential to grab onto and will make your life a lot easier while trying to learn these. And if we step back and look at the whole score again and add some colored highlights to the figures that either mimic each other or are closely related based on their shape to fingering identity, we can see that a sizable amount of the left hand accompaniment is either the same or very similar in shape and fingering. And practicing the left hand with this in mind will take away the stress of feeling like you're going to have to figure out each measure independently. A final important tip for practicing before we move on to the next point. Work in 2 measure chunks and try to loop them so that you get a steady rhythm going. And by loop, of course, I mean play them one after another continuously. It's a very common practicing faux pas to either try and put together a long string of these measures without having secured the fingering and the motion, or to play through the couple of measures you're working on and to stop between playthroughs. Remember, music is a continuous flow, so the more we can emulate that in our practicing, the more effective our practicing will be. So aim for something like this.